Hey everybody, Happy New Year's. Back here in the shop working on Jerry Dean's Mustang some. Thought I'd share some information in regards to rear end housings because I've had questions about this stuff here, so I'm going to try to focus on it quite a bit. Location in the car eventually, but right now I'm just going to talk about how to determine the right width for your housing. Some of the information that most people don't know. I wanted to share that with you guys and give you a little bit of a look at what's going on here, okay? Show you what's going on with the Henry J and the end. So here goes. This is the housing for the Mustang. I just finished welding the back brace on it. TIG welded, of course. I sandblasted this housing. First thing you need to know, and this is upside down, but look at it this way. This is a heavy duty housing. The center was from John's Industries. I got it to build this rear end for Jerry Dean. Most of the sanctioning bodies, especially Sega, want you to run either a heavy duty housing or a round back Edsel type housing. These newer fabricated or semi-fabricated cans, they don't want. So when you're asking to buy a housing, this is what you need. Heavy duty, and or go find a good one out of a junkyard and get a back brace for it. I know Mosier's got a lot of different design back braces, but like I say, this was a John's Industry Center. On a narrow car, I'll use a round back, but these things here where the frame rails are going to be 34 inches wide, I use these heavy duty housing. They're just a lot stronger. One other thing I want you to notice is the housing end's just tacked on, okay? And the reason why I do that is when you're welding on these housings, welding the ladder bar brackets on, back brace of course, all this other stuff, the housings will move, they'll warp, you can't help it. Like this one here, I welded like 1 inch along the whole way, a little bit at a time, and let it set and cool off, and then welded another inch. Took me several hours to do this, but I got it to that point. The reason why I just tack the ends on is because when you're done welding, the brackets on and everything else, I cut these loose and realign them because they will be crooked when you're done. They'll move, you know, I've seen them move up to a 1/16 of an inch. And I use 1.5 inch ground piece of drill rod for a bar. You can get this stuff from McMaster Car. When you're building your cars, I highly recommend that you either make a fixture or buy one on the market. There's several companies out there that sell these reasonably priced. They'll be 1.25 inch bars, and for part-time users, they'll work just fine. So this housing that I'm building, they requested Olds Pontiac ends. That's the brake kit they use, so it's a similar to a symmetrical end, got a pretty long hangout. So that's the housing. We've got a drain and a fill in it, of course. Now let's talk about how I figure out how wide to make this thing. What I do is I prop the wheels and tires up underneath the car to determine where I want the tire to set. And I've seen this mistake made way too many times in cars where guys will just guesstimate where they want them, and the housing will be either too wide or too narrow. I like the way this looked, and what I'm trying to do in this area here is that the rear end housing will travel up about 3 inches. I want this sidewall to clear the body. These wheel openings will be radiused another 1.5 inches, but this locates the tire where I want it side to side. So, and how I do that in here, I take 2 junk axles and use a piece of tubing to support them in the middle. I mean, you can see what I got going on there. I put both wheels in there and bolted the axles in. So I recommend, like if you're doing this, go to a junkyard and get some junk axles and a piece of tubing that'll slide over it. It'll save you a lot of problems in the end. This gives me a wheel to wheel dimension, okay? Things you need to know to determine the housing width is the total axle hangout determined by what brake you want to use, or you know what your goals are there and what you're doing for brakes. A disc brake kit, say a Wildwood or a Mosier kit, will have a 1/4 inch thick hat. So you need to consider that when you're determining your housing width, okay? If you're running a drum, which I don't recommend drag racing, but a lot of guys like them, the drum thickness is 1/8 of an inch. So what I've come up with here, I'm going to walk over to my whiteboard and share a little information with you. And I'm going to take my chair. I'm struggling with my back a little bit, so I can sit here and talk to you about some of this. And I'm not a very good artist, so I'm going to do the best I can here. That's a rough drawing of what my housing is, axle flange to axle flange. That means the outside where the drum will set against the back of the rotor hat. Okay? Things to consider when to come up with a housing width is this stuff right here. Most people don't know this, but this is stuff you need to pay attention to. Early Ford has a 2 3/8 inch axle hangout. And what I mean by axle hangout is from the face of the housing end to the face of the axle. That is hangout. That's what they're going to want to know when you call to order axles, okay? Like I said, early Ford, 2 3/8. Torino is 2 1/2. Chevy, 2 3/4. Olds, Pontiac, and Symmetrical are 2 13/16. Those dimensions are important when you go to narrow your housing, because you have to subtract that dimension from your wheel to wheel plus the thickness of the rotor and or the brake drum to determine housing width. Okay? Recommendations on brakes. Symmetrical, popular right now. Olds and Pontiac, that's what everybody used to run 20 years ago. The stuff's still available, but it's getting a little harder to find. The hats are the same, rotors are the same, it's just a bracket that's different there. Excuse me. Early Ford, guys go out and buy early housings and stuff. They'll have a 2 3/8 hangout. Don't use this stuff. Throw the ends away, the housing ends. Buy new Torino style ends. The reason why is nobody makes brake kits for them things anymore, okay? I think Willwood's got one brake kit, but it's usually hard to get. Just stay away from the early Ford. And it causes clearance issues too, so with the wheel. Torino, 2 1/2. That's the most popular one right now. Everybody's running a Torino with a 2 1/2 inch hangout. That means that there's lots of brake kits available from different people. So a lot of people offer a brake kit to fit the Torino end. So buy, like I say, if you're doing early Ford, buy Torino ends and replace them. Chevy 2 3/4. Most of Chevy 2 3/4 hangout axles are C-clip style axles. So you'd have to run an eliminator, which is a bad idea. And several companies offer a bolt-in adapter to run a Chevy end, but the brakes are so small there's no sense in running them. That little 9-10 inch brake, it won't stop you at 130 miles an hour. So I'm just supplying that information, but if it were me, I would do Symmetrical or the Torino. Like I say, this customer here wanted the Olds Torino or Olds Pontiac ends, so that's what I supplied. Remember now, rotor thickness is 1/4, drum thickness is 1/2 inch, okay? So what I had, I'm gonna get down here where it's easier to see, is this is my housing picture, and you can see I've got the dimensions there. My housing end thickness was 2 inches, and my hangout, being it's Olds Pontiac, was what did I say it was? Hangout was together was 5 1/4 or 5 5/8. So 2 13/16 is 2.8125. I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. So you do that times 2, okay, plus the rotor thickness. So we had a wheel to wheel of 45 3/8, and the rotor thickness is times 2 is a 1/2 inch. So axle flange to axle flange ends up at 44 7/8. Okay, you subtract the hangout from that, which is the 2.8125 times 2 is 5 5/8, and you come up with the housing width of 39 1/4. Okay, pretty simple there. If you're getting all this, like I say, wheel to wheel dimension minus the rotor thickness times 2 minus the hangout times 2 gives you the housing width. Okay, hopefully that's, and I use centered pinion on all this stuff. I'm going to show you something else there that will help you with this stuff. So don't just cut 2 inches off, because some of the housing ends, like the Torinos, I think for Mosier are 2 1/4, but if you buy them from Strange, they're only 1 inch thick. So don't cut your housing until you have the housing ends in your hand. Okay, next thing I'm going to show you is this dealio right here. This is a pinion centering tool for a Mosier, and that's how you'll get these measurements. That goes on the housing, like this, with the center section out. If I can get it flipped up there, it goes on the top and bottom bolt where the 9 inch goes, the center section goes in, and you measure from the center line. I mean, you can see that center line on there. Slips over, like I say, 9 inch forward right there, and then down here, and then you measure from that halfway, divide your overall width by 2, and that gets you with a centered pinion. Okay, now I've built cars, I don't do these, but I have built cars with an offset pinion up to 1 inch. What that does for you is it moves weight over in the front of the car and gets weight off of the left front wheel, because when you go to scale this, when you set the seat, a lot of your weight's going to go to the left front wheel. So to even it out, I've slid the motor over, plus to give you more foot room for pedals and everything else. So that's where I'm at with the housing. Oh, another thing too, I'll show you this all together in the next step. But this little dealio right here, if I can get it in there, that slips in the housing end when I go to put it underneath the car. It goes in the end, and that way it's in the end of the housing, and that way it's not in the way of me putting any brackets on. Then I can still rotate the housing to adjust pinion angle when I go to put it together. I'll show you all that stuff in the next video, but that's how you figure rear end housings, because when you call to order axles and or housing, they're going to want to know these dimensions from you. So with that information, when you go to order axles, you can tell them a housing width and a centered pinion and what brake kit you have, and they can figure the rest. You don't have to try to determine axle lengths. Okay, so that's what I got going on with a Mustang. I try to keep the wheels as wide as I can so that I can keep the frame rails as wide as I can. One other thing too, and you'll see a lot of gassers this way, with the tires hang out of the car. I don't do that because I've had a lot of them. When you're done, guys want the tires sticking out, and then in the end you're cleaning rubber off the roof with WD-40 or something, because it will wreck a paint job. So I always try to keep the top of the tire underneath the body, but as wide as you can get them. The rule is, on a lot of these cars, it's an unwritten rule, but try to keep from the outside of the tread to the outside of the tread in the back, you know, across the outside here, no less than 60 inches. Any narrower than that, and you're going to have a really unstable, ill-handling car. So, like I say, keep the frame rails wide. That way you can keep the suspension mounting points wide and makes a more stable car. hopefully that's enough on the housings. You guys can email me if you got questions. But like I say, the next one I'm going to show you how to prop the housing up underneath the car. I think I did that in one of the other videos, but I'll try to get into a little more detail with this one. So, because I've had some questions on determining pinion angle and stuff like that. I'll try to explain that. In the Henry J, I got the body setting on it. The rear body mounts are made, they're clecoed in. I got it cut, made some temporary mounting brackets to hold the body up here, front and rear, just to keep the rocker where I need it. And of course I've got a plumb bob, if you can see it in there, to determine the center of the car, to make sure it's all centered on the chassis. This one, I think I told you before, was a car that I'd built previously, and we pushed it aside to finish something else. But a lot of this fiberglass will be cut off. I'll show you all that stuff too, but I'm trying to leave as much there as I can just to keep the body solid enough to get it all mounted. So that's where I'm at with what's going on in here. Of course, we're working on this old 50 Chevy too, fixing the brakes and all the other stuff that's wrong with it. So trying to get him down the road. But other than that, I don't know. I talked about mounting seats. I don't think I did, so I'm going to try to share some of that with you. I'm going to go around the other side and do that. We'll talk about this, and I know this video is jumping all over, but we'll just try to get it all in here. So when you're building a car, from that forward bar here, okay, to this bar back here, I try to keep it a minimum of 48 inches, because that's about what it takes for any driver to fit in a car like this, unless he's a little guy, okay? This car is pretty tall, as you can see, you know. So what I do typically is I raise the seats up, because that gives you more access to the pedals that way. You know, with my big old butt, I usually got to put the seats right on the floor to get my head to fit in the car. But this guy here, he's only 5'8", so he'll fit in pretty good. So what I do is I make stanchions to go underneath the seat, and I weld tabs on them. They're made out of 1/2-inch tubing, and of course I weld nuts on the back of the tabs, and then I put 2 tabs, which I can't show you, but you can see the bolts that come off the main hoop, and I leave enough clearance so the seat belt will wrap around that tube. So in later videos, you can see I've got the pedals in this one. In later videos, I'll talk about that stuff in more detail again. I shared that previously, but I'll go over that again. So that's where I'm at in the shop. I thought you guys might want to see what's going on, and I really wanted to share that information in regards to rear end housing. So there you go. Keep watching, like and subscribe. That way more people can see. And I've been posting this on Rumble as well. I do YouTube and Rumble now both, so just thought I'd share that info. Trying to keep it all in a free world. See you soon.